So things are constantly moving back and forth across the plasma membrane into cells and out of cells. All right? And so crossing the membrane is a common occurrence. All the nutrients that you get, all the vitamins, all the minerals that your cells need, they're coming from outside and they got to get into the cell. So you're always looking at how stuff moves into the cell. So crossing the membrane is common. Now, osmosis and diffusion are two ways that materials get in and out. The osmosis, remember, that's water going in and out. We talked about it. Diffusion is movement from a high concentration to a low concentration. We've talked about that. Now, these are both types of passive transport. All right, what it means to be passive transport, this is the fact that certain molecules can go into and out of the membrane just by diffusion. And since the cell does no work in moving those particles, right, so in other words, they're just going to move. The cell doesn't have to do anything. The cell can just sit there and stuff is going to go in and out when you're talking about diffusion. So the cell is not using energy. And since it's not using energy, the movement of those particles across the membrane by diffusion is called passive transport because the cell doesn't use any energy. So things are just going to kind of float through the cell membrane. And that's what these are. These phospholipids make up the cell membrane. And stuff just kind of floats through. So from where there's high concentration to where there's low concentration, they just kind of flow through. The cell doesn't have to do anything. All right? But passive transports of particles through the lipid bilayer only happens with a few substances. There's only a couple of things that can actually let it just float on through there. And so other molecules have to get through in different ways. All right, so these are moving through the membrane. These are using a little help. Transport proteins are in the bilayer and they allow substances to pass through. You can kind of think about a transport protein almost like a tunnel through a mountain. There's a tunnel dug through the mountain. Now you can go through the mountain. It's an opening. You can move through it. That's what a transport protein does. Now the passive transport of materials across the plasma membrane through transport proteins is called facilitated diffusion. When you facilitate something, you're helping it. And so the proteins are helping diffusion take place, and so we call it facilitated diffusion. Now the transport proteins provide easy openings for particles to pass through. Again, kind of like that tunnel through the mountain. All right? And so it looks something like this. They're just tunnels. See? Here's your plasma membrane. Here are your tunnels, letting things go in and out. So that's how the membrane proteins work. They're just making an opening, the stuff that can flow through. Now, sometimes cells have to do some work to get the materials that they need in or out. And that's called active transport. And the reason why we need active transport is that cells require nutrients that are often scarce in their surroundings, all right? So the cells like to pack in vitamins and minerals so that they have them when they need them. And those vitamins and minerals, there's not much of it out here. And there's already a lot of it in here. And so it's scarce out in their surroundings. And so they got to go get it. So they must get these nutrients against the concentration gradient. So it's kind of like things are moving backwards because it's against the concentration gradient. And so when you move those materials against the concentration gradient, it's called active transport. because the cells got to use energy to do it. Yeah, if you're pulling things the opposite direction of what they really want to go, that takes some energy. You got to go work for it. All right, and so you got to use the energy, and that's why we call it active transport. All right, in active transport, a transport protein locks onto, so it's like it grabs it, locks onto a particle of the substance that's going to be transported. And then chemical energy is used. It takes energy to pull it in. Okay, energy is used to change the shape of the protein so that the particle can be moved to the other side of the plasma membrane. And this allows the particle to be moved against the concentration gradient. All right, so it looks something like this. You have these particles out here. See, there's not many of them. And in here, there's more. So we're looking at these red little particles. See? Okay, we want more of them. There's only 2 particles outside. There's already 4 inside. And so the cell's going to grab hold of it. And when it locks on, the protein changes shape. So this protein becomes this one. And that's where it's using the energy. ATP is energy for your cell. ATP is used to change it. And now it can be moved inside the cell. So where there's a lot of them, changing shapes, moves it inside. Takes energy, so we call it active transport. So when you look at the 2 side by side, how they're different. Passive transport, things are just going to flow from the area of high concentration to the area of low concentration. But in active transport, you're moving things the opposite way, from where there is low concentration to high concentration. So you got to use energy to get it across. So that's looking at them side by side. Now, sometimes cells have to go out and get really big particles. Some cells, like single-celled organisms, actually will use this in order to eat. Okay, it's how they get their food. So it's transport of large particles. You have endocytosis, which is the process in which a cell surrounds and then takes in, okay, material from the environment. So it looks something like this. So here's your little food particle, your cell. You can see the cell starting to indent, and basically it's engulfing the particle, just totally surrounding it until that particle is inside the cell. All right? So a special type called phagocytosis is a type of endocytosis in which very large particles move into a cell. And this is also how your white blood cells work to attack bacteria and viruses and get rid of them. They engulf them, surround them, and take care of them. Now, cells will also get rid of stuff in the opposite process, and that's called exocytosis. Okay, exocytosis is used by cells to get rid of wastes from the inside to the outside. So here's a little packet full of waste. It moves to the cell membrane, attaches, and then it's almost like it spits out all the bad stuff. All right, this is an actual microscope picture of that happening. All right, so endo, in, exo, exits. That's how you can keep them apart. Endocytosis, endo, in. Exocytosis, exo, exits the cell. When you put the 2 processes together, it works kind of like your digestion. All right, food particles are surrounded and taken into the cell by endocytosis. The cell can break them down and get the nutrients out. What's left over is waste. Waste attaches and exocytosis gets rid of it. All right? So it's a cycle that the cells use to get in nutrients and stuff and then get rid of the waste from them. All right? Hope that all makes sense.